Boker Tov. Hope you had a good Memorial Day holiday and gave some thought to the sacrifices of so many young men and women over the ages. For what? For freedom, for our Constitution as it reads. Okay. So today I want to tell you about another big change that's happening before your very eyes. It's been happening for several years now, but it's in high gear, and its implications are enormous. And our government and our Federal Reserve and others are not being honest with you. And you need to understand this change. It is so significant. It is so profound. It is worldwide, and it has implications. And as you know, as people in society, we have to make our plans. We have to live according to reality, and the reality is different today than you might have thought it was. And it has to do with economic policy and how it's executed by the government. I'm going to talk about America, but what I'm going to describe to you is happening around the world. It is part of the Great Reset. It's part of the One World Order. It is part of what you see being talked about, or you don't see being talked about, because they keep it so quiet at meetings like Bundaberg and at Davos and other places. This is people of multiple parties, multiple large corporations, different other kinds of highly influential, wealthy people, and so forth. Making plans about the future as it's going to affect all of us. Now, this impact is the impacts touch every aspect of our world: healthcare, business, you name it. Okay, but I'm going to talk particularly about one aspect, which is sort of the overarching theme here, and hope you can get your head around this. So forever to men, we've had this thing called Keynesian economics. We've had this principle in government where government would have certain programs that it has to operate, certain obligations like defense, etc., and it would tax people in order to meet those obligations. Okay, and the theory was that you had to keep a balance between your deficits year to year. Otherwise, you accumulate debt. Now, we've accumulated more debt in the last few years, literally the last few years, than we accumulated in the first 230 years of our government. Seriously, let's think about that. In the last 200 plus years, our national debt was a tiny fraction of what it is today. And now it's so astronomical, it has essentially risen to the point of default. In other words, we've always recognized that there was no gold backing on our currency. It was always based on the full, in God we trust, and the full faith and credit of the United States government, okay? And the fact that it could print money. All right. And as the reserve currency for the world, America was exceptionally, uniquely able to exploit currency as a way of carrying our debt. All right. Now, the theory again was that you taxed in order to cover the deficit, in order to operate the government. All right. In robust years, you would also raise interest rates and perhaps tax more, both as a means of recovering, slowing down the economy and recovering the deficit from years when you had a soft economy, a recession, when you might spend more and maybe reduce taxes or give incentives and other things to stimulate the economy, spend more, lower interest rates to increase money into the economy. And in order to get some velocity of that money, some movement of that money, government had to find ways to spend it, right? If the government prints a bond and just the Treasury and it goes to, gets bought, it doesn't necessarily stimulate the economy unless that bond money is spent somewhere, it's put somewhere. So typically in recession years, that bond money was used to operate the government, all right? And then, as I say, in robust years, you replenish that, and so you manage to keep the national debt from year to year on a balance, theoretically below 50% of GDP. Well, now it's upwards of 130% of GDP. Okay, now we're not alone in this. Japan is probably close to 200, 250. China's probably 4 times ours. So this is happening in countries around the world. But here's what's significantly different: is that model is being altered or changed radically. It is a huge paradigm shift to a new theory, modern monetary theory. You're not hearing about it much. I promise you, you are going to hear a lot more about it. Now, they're afraid to talk about it because they're afraid how markets react. They're afraid about the debate, how it's happened without Congress even having any say in this, which is really disturbing. Okay, this is happening to us because of leaders that are doing this unbeknownst to us as citizens, and it really is. It's really I think one of the great cover-ups of our time, in a sense. Okay, so what's going on with modern monetary theory? The premise is that we know currencies are fiat, they're fake, they're not backed by anything other than faith. Okay, there is the ability for the government to print money. It's a fake currency. They call it fiat. Okay, now all the currencies are fiat. There's nothing out there other than precious metals per se, where they're actually literally backed by a tangible asset. Of course, things are collateralized, but printing money is not collateralized. Okay, it's just printed. It literally is just going to a computer, hit a trillion zeros, a trillion in zeros, and you have $1 trillion. It's that simple. Okay, so what's to stop them? Well, frankly, free markets are to stop them, but free markets are letting them get away with it, and that's making them very excited at the top. Because here's the way it flips: if you can print as much money as you want, then what's the reason you print less money? Why would you not print more money? And the reason is inflation. Okay, so we're starting to see that peek its head out. Yellen, Powell, I think they're lying to us. I think they know what they're doing, and I think they're lying to us. I think that they're, or at least being oblique, not completely in full good faith. So here's the idea: that it's not so much that you have fake currency, it's not so much that you print money. The issue is that how do you stop inflation? Okay, and the premise is that you can print as much as you want. They can spend as much money as they want. The only time you really have an issue is if you have a problem with inflation. Now, there's a few ways inflation can rear its head. One way is the dollar gets devalued. And so goods and services that we need that come from outside the country cost more. Imports cost more. As imports cost more, as the dollar goes down, what becomes more competitive? U.S. goods. Inside the country, U.S. goods become more competitive inside the country and as exports. If our dollar is weak, our products are cost less for other countries to import. So the inflationary cost to us is, maybe the cost of lumber as an example, okay, coming in from another country. Oil and gas, because we have such a large supply here, doesn't necessarily have to be affected by this, okay? So then the next cause of inflation is too many dollars chasing too few goods or services, okay? So if everybody wants to buy something and the quantity or supply of that something is inadequate and the demand is high and there isn't an alternative or new competition, what happens is the goods go up or the services go up. You're seeing that now, okay? You're seeing that increase now. Now, at this point, the last tick was 4.3 annual percentage rate adjusted for inflation. That's the highest in, that's highest in like 30 years or something. It's significant. It's not only a significant milestone, but it's also the rate at which we got there. We literally went there in 1 quarter, if not 2, okay? Which is, the velocity of inflation should be as alarming as the level of inflation. Okay, now, here's the thing. What is the government doing from a fiscal standpoint? What is the government doing to manage this? Because the Federal Reserve is keeping interest rates low. They're buying these bond issuances, right? What is the federal government doing? federal government is doing is it has slightly different perspective or tact on what I was describing before. Now they have a very significant role to deal with inflation, and so they can raise taxes, right? And they can choose to change spending. But they're not going to lower spending right now. The government is actually increasing spending, and it's increasing taxes. So what we see happening is the government is using this opportunity for essentially unlimited money to redistribute wealth. Okay? So what you have is a wealth redistribution. At the same time, they're creating inflation, which also essentially lowers the value of the outstanding debt. $100 today versus what's $100 worth today versus what is it worth in 5 years from now? What is it worth in 10 years from now, right? So if we have, significant inflation, you take 4% and you compound that for, 5 years, what's the cost of the debt that we have outstanding? In relative terms, it's gone down. But at the same time, they're increasing the debt because the debt doesn't matter in this scenario. You can print as much money as you want. Do you get it? You could print as much money as you want. So what might be analogous to this, how this becomes destructive, is winning the lottery, right? Or some athletes that get these big checks. They go nuts. People get irresponsible, and it ruins their lives. Okay? I don't know if you happen to watch the Minsky method. I'm not saying it right. And the last season, the third season, I just finished binging that. There's a scene where Norman, well, you know what? I don't want to give away the secrets. So forget that analogy. Point being is sometimes there can be an inheritance. And lives, you think that life's great. They got all this money. And then all of a sudden they blow it and make bad decisions, and people around them are different and so forth. So unlimited money has a lot of different ways it affects things. But what we're doing is we're taking a gamble here. This is a gamble because it is modern monetary theory. There's been a long history of how capitalism works under the old method. There's not a long history. And some of the history about unlimited printing of money in history doesn't have a good track record. So we're experimenting here, folks. Just like with the vaccine. Now, maybe that's working out really well. I don't know. But the point of it is, from a monetary standpoint, we are doing something very extraordinary. And you're not getting told the truth. Because what you're going to find out soon is the government is going to tell you, economists, business people, probably progressive liberals largely, are going to tell you that this debt doesn't matter anymore. The government's not like a household. Because why? Because households can't print money. Imagine you had a printing press in your basement and it was legal, right? Well, that's what progressive liberals feel like they have right now. And also some Republicans too. There's a lot of folks. In fact, there's a whole world order of folks that are adopting this concept in their minds and in their plans. So they're allowing for inflation in their plans. They're assuming some substantial economic prosperity and growth. Money's loose, money's cheap, money's abundant. Creates a different atmosphere. And it's going to be fun. If you're invested in things, you're enjoying it. If you have a job with a fixed income, you don't have investments, you don't own real estate, etc., you could feel quite like you're missing the train. And there's a lot of millennials that feel that way. I'm afraid there's a lot of young people that don't have strong jobs and don't have assets. But what are they waiting for? A lot of them are waiting for the wealth transference. In this coming period of time here, in the next, let's say the next 20 years, even less, there's going to be the greatest wealth transfer in the history of our country. And everybody wants a piece of it. Nonprofits want a piece of it. The government's going to want a piece of it. And children want a piece of it. Okay, everybody wants a piece of that wealth transference. There'll be some interesting competition for it, but guess who has first dibs? The government. The government, because they can tax it. So if you want to control the wealth transference, if you want to control the distribution of wealth, one of the best times to control the distribution of wealth is when wealthy people die. And then you distribute that wealth by taking it back from them and putting it back to other uses. And thus, you're sort of rebalancing the economy. And if you're somebody that doesn't have much of anything, or even if you do, you might say, well, why isn't that a good thing? Why isn't that a fair thing? And now we get into a moral discussion. A moral discussion. Is it right? Well, is stealing right? It's stealing. And, you know, the person that steals from a bank or from anyone thinks, oh, I have the right to it. The person that defrauds their insurance company, well, I have a right to it. They're wealthy, they can afford it. It's stealing. It's taking something that's not yours. And in the process, that person paid taxes. They paid taxes all the way up in the creation of their wealth. They pay taxes today. And in the process, they created wealth. Chances are they created a lot more wealth than many other people. As much as it's desirable to want to say, you know, let's take their money, it's wrong. It's ethically wrong. And so you start to become an immoral nation. You're starting to talk about communism here. That's one of the fundamental immoralities of communism, is the seizure of property. You got to see this, folks. We are heading into areas that are fraught with so many big questions, and it'd be nice to be able to discuss them. The problem is you can't discuss them because the media won't discuss them. The media is in on the monetary theory. They're in on progressive liberals. Okay, so there's a lot of issues with discussing this, but we need to be able to have a discussion, and morality has to enter into it. The 10 Commandments have to enter into this discussion, because what's the old expression? If you gain the world but lose your soul. This is what we're talking about, folks. This is the essence here. Besides which, that person that's going to get taxed a lot, you know, they're going to make other choices with that money. They're going to spend it. That's going into the economy. When they spend that money, it goes into the economy another way. But it goes in the economy through their choices. If they give it to their children, that's their choice. If their children spend it, it goes into the economy that way. If they give some to a hospital or a library or a temple or a church, that's their choice. And it goes into the economy that way. The question is, who should be making the decision about what money goes into the economy and where it goes? The citizens. The citizens. That's what we revolted against, taxation without representation. Who's representing you when you take somebody's wealth away and spend it where you want to spend it? Where was their representation in those decisions of where to spend that money? You see, there's a lot of moral questions. It sounds so easy. Just print the money. Just redistribute the money. It's a slippery slope to a really dangerous place, folks. And you need to prepare yourself. There's a lot more you have to know. Alrighty, have a good week.